Hi everyone and welcome to a new video, and this time we're going to talk about Audio Imperia's new orchestral sample library Nucleus. And I'm pretty excited, seriously excited, because this library sounds absolutely awesome. So before we hop into explaining a few very essential things, let me just play you a few sounds, and in this case we start with the solo violin. Yes, I mean, that sounds really awesome, seriously. And let me just play you a few more of these patches here. So let's check out the sustained solo violin. So just in case if you need a little bit of a... Okay, and before we hop into more of these patches here, let me just explain you a very quick thing, or explain you the GUI in general. So according to Audio Imperia, this library is mainly focused towards entry-level composers, people who never had the chance to buy an entire orchestra library. But I mean, in my opinion, as a pro composer, I don't care if something is aimed towards this or whatever. I just totally focus on, does it sound great or not? And this library definitely sounds great. But to make it easier for entry-level composers and also pros, you got two different GUIs. So the first one would be a basic one where you can have, just in case, whatever you prefer. You have a classic mix. Like, let's check this out. Well, let me just load the legato patch again. And also let's check the, sorry, that was the modern mix, and now the classical mix. So it sounds a little bit more, you know, of course, focused towards classical music, more natural, while the modern mix is a little bit more, yeah, a little bit more crisp and simply just a, as it says, a more modern mix. And you also got reverb. Let's turn this off for a moment. Oops. Okay, so typical, and I mean, typical the settings as a reverb. I think it sounds really great. Also, they have it set to like 62, I'm sorry, 62%. So you can fool around with this, what suits better to you, what sound you prefer. And also you got the mod wheel applied to control the dynamics. And I think there is a great range between... So I think the range on the ensemble instruments is a little bit more, but that's totally cool here. And expression, which is basically some sort of a volume control. Let's see this. So I ever touch this. And also you got the advanced setting here. And so you got a little bit more control over the reverb. And there is another very important feature I'm going to talk about in a minute, and it's the sample start feature. But before we talk about this, let me just play you a few more patches here. Let's check out the solo cello. Very cool. Let's check out the solo flute. So for these solo instruments, you basically got the legato and the sustained patches. So this is the most important thing you would use when you feature a solo instrument. So to be serious, when I try to have some staccato stuff going on, I always load up the solo patches. But let's check out the solo oboe legato patch. I think this sounds just really beautiful, and nothing to add. Let me just check the solo trumpet. Sorry, I always cut off earlier. Let me just turn off the microphone. Yes, and the solo French horn, and that's it for the solo section here. Okay, and before we hop on to, let's say, let me load the sections right now. There is one very important thing I wanted to talk about. And sorry, it's important to understand it. And this is the sample start feature. And this is very important because let me explain it like this. When you have a drum roll, a little bit of a drum roll, and it goes like vraf, okay? So the end of that note, that vraf, okay? This would be the one. So no computer never ever will be able to predict the future and know that if you hit a key on one, that the very end of that sample would be on one. The actual sample would start with that little build up before that, okay? So please keep that in mind right now, and please pay a little bit of attention, because it's really important to understand why there is so much latency going on in not just in this library, but also in any other library, but especially with the features being introduced with Nucleus, and all the legato transitions, all the release samples, they have been synced manually in order, to give you the most realistic experience. So when you have a legato sample being triggered between two notes, okay, so there's, in a sense, and just as a comparison, there is something going on, right? What you would compare with that drum roll, with that little rough, okay? Something in that legato interval is needed to needs a little bit of latency in order to make it as real as possible. And the same goes for release samples. So therefore, Audio Imperia set the sample start to minus 120 second, minus 125 milliseconds. So, okay, in order to give you this the most realistic experience. So you won't probably get it from me looking at me playing the keys and listening to the sound, but when you play it, you hear clearly that there is this latency of 125 milliseconds going on. And you get the most realistic experience when you put that to minus 250, but it's actually the hardest to play in real time. But you get a very realistic let's say a very realistic experience. When I move it back to 0 milliseconds to nothing, you have a very great reaction when you play it live, but you have probably the worst, you know, well, let's say it makes just sense to play it live, but once you are about to render your track, bounce it to audio, you probably want to set it either to minus 250 or leave it just in case. If you don't know what I'm doing, I'm hitting the control key with the left mouse button. This always resets a button, just in case you didn't know this. On contact, it resets it to default level. So minus 125 seconds is like a good balance of still being able to play it in real time and have a very great realistic, you know, experience of legato and release samples. And why did I mention this? Because it's very important to understand why this latency is going on. And later on, when you compose or when you finish composing your track, or maybe you could do this right when you create a template with Nucleus, you may want to set each of these tracks with a delay of minus 125 milliseconds in order to have it exactly, you know, the one really is hitting the one. Okay, so I hope this made sense. And if you have trouble understanding, or if you have some questions, just, you know, drop them in the comments below, and I will make sure to reply to that as soon as possible. But for now, let's check out some more sounds. So let's check out the sustained patch here. And moving on to the spiccato samples. Okay, moving on to the pizzicato samples. I didn't find the ending. So as I mentioned before, the dynamic level on the ensemble patches is really great. Also, you have a little folder, it's called Tight Patches, and I think this is just when you, let me load the legato tight section. I think it's if you hit check the advanced settings, Yeah, it's probably that's what I assumed. It's actually it loads with the sample start setting to 0. So this is what we talked about before. So just in case you don't want to go to the advanced settings page and hit the sample start, you just want to load the tight settings. What you also could do is like, create, actually that wouldn't make sense. Let me just think about what I was trying to say. So that you actually try to load the tight settings first and then, just reload the patches with the, but it would be easier to just load the patch, and not the tight patches, but the patch itself, and fool around with the sample start function later in order to make your track the most realistic. I hope it was clear what I'm trying to say, but don't be surprised if you find these tight folders in there. These are basically preloaded with sample start on 0 instead of -125, and -125 applies to all the patches. So you have like this whole thing going on. So even if you don't want to set a minus delay on each of your tracks, just leave it to -127 and 25 in general, and maybe just cut out the very first -125 milliseconds later. But if you're working with other libraries, there may be different pre-delays, different latencies going on. Some libraries just have a latency of -80, -40, but just pay attention to this. There is always latency going on with basically, as far as I can think back with pretty old libraries, introducing the first legato settings or whatever, there is always a little bit latency going on. And just as a personal note, it really strikes me when you hear like very cool mock-ups, sample library pieces, but there is always a lot of latency going on, especially when you have drums where you have the arrangement is pretty tight and everything, and suddenly you have like a string section going on, being introduced in the track, and it starts off like, this totally destroys it for me. Maybe just me, but I really pay attention to all these things which make a track groove. And even if it's orchestral music and not just funk or anything, it just has to groove. There is a specific groove to it, and you really have to pay attention to all these latency settings. So let's check out a few more samples here. Let's check out the violas. Spiccatos. So please forgive me. Usually you wouldn't do this. Play like, with a viola patch. I mean, if it sounds great and fits the track, okay, but you wouldn't do it when you have like all these sections available, like cello, violas, violins. You wouldn't play like a full chord like this with just violas. So always pay attention that you have a little bit of realism to your mock-ups, but you probably know that already. The legato cello. And also let's check the classic mix for a second here. Sorry, I'm slipping off the keys. Okay, and spiccato samples. So especially with all these, spiccato samples and pizzicato samples, especially, you will hear that latency, these 125 milliseconds, very clearly. So again, please make sure to take care of these settings and to, set this minus delay to your tracks before you render it, because you want it to sound professional. I'm sorry for all these, for all these, kind of Mr. Know-it-all things, but you can't mention it often enough, I hear so much, especially there was one thing I never talked about actually, but it really, and I don't know if it was on purpose, but there was this thing going on with the initial Transformers soundtrack, and I really, really love the music. I really love that soundtrack, especially the main theme. It's just awesome, but there is something going on which always made me curious, and I didn't find any information on it, and it's just, when this horn melody comes in, there is always like a latency going on, and to me it sounds like as if the composer, I'm really sorry to say this, but as if the composer, and maybe it was intentional because it was robots, so they wanted to make it a little bit more sterile or whatever. But anyway, to me it sounds as if the composer forgot to turn the latency, to set a minus point of the latency on the horns. And of course, I would assume that the score is real orchestra, but to me it sounds like sampled horns and with a wrong delay, or with a wrong delay time. So maybe if you listen to the soundtrack again, you know what I mean. But I thought about this several times. Let's put it like this. Okay, let's check out the double basses. Yeah, there's a lot of yeah, I like this. Sorry if you hear these little they sound like glitches. They actually come from the keyboard. Yep, this sounds pretty, I already hate the word, but it sounds pretty epic, seriously. Yes, balls. Pizzicato. Very cool. Seriously, I really like this library, and really, when I heard the first demo, I don't know even who composed the really first demo. I don't want to bring up any wrong names right now, otherwise I'm really sorry. I would mention the composer, but there was this first demo I heard, and it just blew me away. So I'm really happy now that that I have the chance to do a little walkthrough video here. Yeah. Okay, so more patches. That's the strings only. We spent so much time just talking about the strings. So let's check out the woodwind sections here, the flutes. And as you can't see it right now, but you have the sections. You don't have the legato samples going on. But again, which I don't find to be a problem, because every time you have some legato melody or something going on with woodwinds, you would have it on a featured solo instrument instead of the whole section. So maybe it's just me, but it makes more the most sense. And Staccatissimo. Whoops. And let's load the thrills. And the whole tone thrills. I always want to say thrill, but it's actually trill. So sorry. Whole tone trills. Very cool. Seriously, I love the sound of this library. Let's check out the oboes. Staccatissim samples. Okay, so I don't want to go through each of these patches. Let me definitely check out the bassoons, because I find this really important, because especially when you have cellos going on, especially when you have like melody lines, legato lines with the cello, it always sounds really great when you double that with a bassoon. Let me just quickly check if there are in the solo sections, but I think I didn't see bassoons. No, but I mean, if you have the legato cello going on and you have a sustained patch going on. I already lost. Sorry, and you have the sustained patch going on. That's totally cool. I mean, the legato transition of the cello will take care to, you know, blur out a little bit. Just the sustained interval, or actually the non-interval happening between these two notes. So this is totally fine. Okay, so let's hop on and check the clarinets real quick. I think it's okay to just check out the sustained samples, because we still... I can't explain it actually, but even being a licensed or a trailer composer, clarinets are my most favorite instrument of the orchestra. I don't know why, but... Okay, so let's move on. Let's hop on to, because we have the brass to cover and there is also percussions going on and choirs too. So let's check out the legato trumpets here. Okay, so just as a little hint, in case you are an aspiring composer or someone who is just exploring the orchestral landscape with this library, it's always a great thing to layer the Staccatissimo samples with the legato samples and put it, you know, put it like into the same instance of contact and just assign it to the same MIDI key. So if you have like a low, let me just, you won't see it, but all I'm doing now is let's load the legato samples again and just let's layer this with a Staccatissimo sample. So I'm loading this below this. You don't see this right now, but I'm setting the Staccatissimo samples, the patch I just loaded, I match it or I assign it to the same MIDI channel. So I play both right now. So just, you have a little bit of, you know, you need a little bit of tweaking later on, but when you play like a legato line, you have to hit the keys really soft, but when you want to do something like, let me just tweak a little bit because it needs a tiny little bit of tweak that I lower the volume on the Staccatissimo samples. Okay, let's turn them really down to -8 dB. And just to quickly show it to you what I'm trying to. So you're able to play both, you know, if it goes up to like, you know, especially when you think of Indiana Jones or something, and then you just want to switch back to some legato, but you don't want to switch around with key switches or other settings. So you just want this to be right at hand, you know, so this makes a lot of sense to just load legato samples and load the staccato samples to these patches in addition and control them with the same MIDI channel or on the same MIDI channel. So you have both of these settings available or that feature available. Okay, legato French horns. So this is what I really like about it, when you have a slow legato going on. You know, you have like a real, you know, like this, it's kind of embracing that transition, you know? And when you play it fast, okay, you know what I mean? When you play it really fast, it changes that transition, making it more realistic. French horns, Staccatissimo. Okay, and yes, trombones, baby, definitely. And So back then when I started doing my first template, I always looked that everything is available as legato samples. I always legato, 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 everything, everywhere they had to be legato. But to be honest, for trombones, and if you listen to all these orchestra soundtracks and all these movie soundtracks, most of even the French horn melodies, they are never like da na 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 something like this, but it's always like ba 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 ba. So you always have kind of sustained with a heart attack, sustained samples with a heart attack. With a heart attack, no, with a heart attack. So, but that's why I wanted to show you the little trick with layering it with Staccatissim samples, because especially when you have like, it makes a lot of sense to layer or to just, you know, put a little bit of emphasis on the initial attack. So that's why it's cool to layer these two. Okay, tubas. Balls again. So you have Staccatissimo too, and this is the great thing. I mean, most of the time, hand on the heart, if you do, you know, when you don't do detailed orchestral music, you know, like John Williams, like, or I mean, even then, I probably shouldn't say this, but but most of the time, you basically need legato, sustained, staccatissimo, and of course a few other essential patches you find here. But this library focuses on all of these basic articulations you need to definitely start making great music. And I mean, to be honest, this library is already, I mean, in my head, part of my orchestra template, definitely. Because, oh, sorry, I always missed that. There is a low brass patch here. So this is probably just combined tuba and trombones. Yes. How could I miss that? And let's move on to the percussions. Okay, so we got tonal percussion, atonal percussion, and a drum kit. Let's check out some of the tonal percussions. And there is just the timpanis. So this, yeah, sustained rolls. And you also got crescendo, but let's move on to atonal percussion. So we got the gran cassa. So this is probably a key switched. No, it isn't, sorry. I was confused a little bit because I really like this, because there is like, you got the hits, you got the sustained rolls, but it looks like as it would be key switches. But it shows you exactly what it's triggering. It's funny, but I never seen this before, but it's really cool. Tom's low. So probably have to fool around with my keyboard or the advanced settings to get the velocity curve right. But so the transition between the very soft samples and the more dynamic, the louder ones is a little bit, so maybe I should, yeah, that does it. Okay, so if you have trouble, you know, like playing soft stuff, and you immediately hit like the louder ones, fool around with this curve. Yep, that's much better. So you know what to do now. Tom's high. Really great sounding. So this is the great thing. So you got all these great sounds, but they are all, you know, being available, let's say, as a whole orchestra library. It's out of one, it's just one match, you know, it's just glued together because it's probably recorded, of course, in the same hall and applied with the same reverb. So I already know for the percussions, I would prefer the the shelf curve, not the linear one. What is fixed? Oh. Okay, so this is basically one velocity. I can move it so it would always trigger the loud ones, just in case you want that. But I would prefer the shelf settings in order to have the best playability, especially when you want to do it dynamically. Piaris. I probably would have loved to have a stopped one. Maybe you can do some of these. I honestly didn't read that part of the manual, but maybe you can have like stop one. But even in don't, you got the essential. You get the essential Piatti samples. Tum-tums. Okay, so let's head over to the drum kit. So we have like a full drum kit here, and I probably want to move on to the choir, but let's check this out real quick. So of course this comes in handy. Probably not the best drum set for, you know, new metal djenty sound, but it's definitely great to have when you want to have, and this is the most important point. This is what I also wanted to mention. Many composers just tend to say, you know, this doesn't sound good, this is not a good kick. Of course, if you do like metal stuff and you listen to Meshuggah, this is probably not, you know, the best kick drum. But you have to see it in relation to that library. So if you want to create a soundtrack which is, you know, is really glued and baked together and sounds really organic and, you know, I forgot the word, but, you know, like really that whole thing, you know, out of one glue, or how do you say, really melt together, it makes the most sense to use the drum set of this library, because it simply creates it simply has the same character as the rest of the samples. Okay, so let's head over to the final section here, the choirs. Okay, so I didn't check this section, though this is entirely new to me. So we have the sopranos, we have the sustained A's. Yes, I like this. So I just have to, but actually, okay, so you can hit the triggers here, the key switches, and then, but to be honest, it may, it may almost be blasphemy, but seriously, when I do choirs, I don't care about what they sing. I just tend to check out if the phrases sound natural, because if you have real singers and you write lyrics and you record that, all fine, all good. But if you use samples and you try to create words, you try to create sense-making syllables, I mean, my recommendation is just forget about it. Just take care that the phrase itself sounds good in and matching the track. And And this is very important to know. This is also kind of a re-trigger. So if you just have a phrase, and then you have the next phrase, and then you have the chorus or whatever going on, you always want to set a general triggering point. And this is cool. So if you hit this E here, it always starts from that E. And so imagine if you have like man, and you have the altos and the basses. I mean, basses are main too, but you know what I'm trying to say. So if you have all these different sections and you do choirs, you want to pay attention so they all playing from the same trigger. Okay, yeah. So actually, we went through the whole library, but I just want to check. There is also more settings going on. So we check the soloist, we check the section samples. There are also pre-orchestrated, let's call them pre-org. Let's quickly check. So basically all of these patches are octaved patches. So you have the violins and violas, violins up an octave or violas an octave below, however you want to call it. And let's just quickly load the French horns and the trombones as a legato patch. So these come in handy, especially when you just want to quickly, get like a decent legato line or some decent character, orchestrated character, how you want to call it, going. So I also want to check out with you. So basically all of these, not to move too fast, but all of these sections here, let's check the flutes and the clarinet. So you get like, you don't have legato sections for all of these. Let me just quickly load here the sustained flutes and clarinets. So if you really want to have legato going with these things, you still can layer it with a flute legato, Okay. And so on. Let's check out the violins and the violas. It sounds really cool. Again, I wish there would be legato going, but you could still blend it, and the legato transition sample would always, kind of melt together, bake together with these sustained samples here. So you could kind of blurry it with the legato transition of the solo patch or the ensemble patch. Very beautiful sound too. And last but not least, we want to check out the full section here. So of course, the full sustained strings. So these patches are really cool when you want to sketch out specific ideas. And I have the same going on with my template, and I hope I can show it later to you in another video. And what I all the time do is like I deactivate all of these single articulations and just have these full ensembles active. And so I can quickly check out stuff and see if it works, see how it sounds, if it's worth continuing. And then when I just kind of did this sketch, you know, on these full ensemble patches, you just split it up. You just split the parts or copy the parts or just, you know, just simply move these parts to the individual sections and work with those. Okay, so you get an idea. Let's quickly load the spiccato section and mute my microphone. So maybe go to the advanced setting. Maybe I decide to, you know, put this to shelf on most of these patches because it feels like a little bit better playing wise. Okay, so basically we went through the full library. Also, maybe at the end, let's check out the full choir, the full ensemble on the sustained R patches. Yes, pretty nice. So we actually went to the whole library, through the whole library, and just in case you got any questions, any comments, any suggestions, feel free to put them down in the comment section. And I definitely can recommend this library, so make sure to check it out on the Audio Imperia website. I put the link down below. Again, thanks again for your time. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for future videos. And again, thanks for your time and thanks for watching, and see you later. Bye.